Okay, so you're done with Unit 1, Foundations of America. What's left to do? It's time to get ready for the exam. But first, let's see how everything we learned in Unit 1 comes together. In Objective 1, we learned about American colonialism and the role that American colonies played in the British mercantilistic system. That included the founding of many American colonies for the purpose of British economic gain. In Objective 2, we learned about religion in the colonies. Some colonies were founded for the purpose of religious freedom. Not all colonies were open and accepting of people of different faiths, and some were pretty intolerant of others. But the idea of religious freedom began in the colonies and becomes important later on in the founding documents. In Objective 3, we learned about the brutality of slavery in early America. We learned why slavery was used in the early American colonies. We learned about how slaves were treated, and how the issue of slavery itself divided the country in the pre-Civil War years. In Objective 4, we learned about the influence of different Enlightenment thinkers on the American founding fathers. Their ideas would inspire American colonists to begin to question traditional British authority over them in the colonies, and the philosophies of the Enlightenment would become the foundation for the American founding documents. In Objective 5, we learned about British taxation and the American response to that taxation. We learned how progressively the American Revolution began to build, until finally the American colonists declared independence and took up arms to fight for their liberty. In Objective 6, we learned about the Second Continental Congress and the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We read the document, translated it, and found all the different Enlightenment ideas that were written into it by its author, Thomas Jefferson. These principles are at the very core of American society. In Objective 7, we learned that after we had won our independence through the Revolutionary War by defeating Great Britain, we now had a country to build. Two parties, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, argued at the Constitutional Convention how to structure our new government. The argument over how much power the federal government should have as compared to the state governments still rages on today in American politics. In Objective 8, we learned about the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments of the Constitution protect essential liberties of the people. It was included in the Constitution at the behest of the Anti-Federalists. In Objective 9, we learned about the separation of powers, the three branches of government, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial, and how each of the branches can check the others from becoming too powerful, essentially preventing the abuse of power by the federal government. In Objective 10, we learned about the Establishment and Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. This clause prohibits government from promoting one religion over any other, or prohibiting your ability to exercise any religion you wish. It gave birth to the principle of separation of church and state, the idea that government and religion should remain separate of each other. In Objective 11, we learned about manifest destiny, the idea that God had predetermined that the American people should settle all the land of North America from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. American trailblazers went west in search of a new start, religious freedom, and economic mobility. We annexed Texas, fought a war with Mexico, and won new territory, and expanded American borders from sea to shining sea. In Objective 12, we learned about the Trail of Tears. American Indian relocation is one of the darkest chapters in American history. Time after time, as our fragile new nation formed, its relationship with the Native American tribes who naturally inhabited this land was dark and sad. Through forced relocation, bad treaties, and terrible massacres, the United States and the original inhabitants of North America continue to try to mend the wounds of the difficult past they have shared together. In the 13th and final objective, we learned about the era of American Reconstruction, a brief period in American history after the Civil War where the country focused on mending its wounds and rebuilding itself into a stronger nation. The southern states who had rebelled against the North needed to be readmitted, and all freed slaves had to be incorporated for the first time into American society as free citizens. Their rights had to be protected by law, while at the same time they had to deal with resistance from white Southerners who struggled to cope with this new change of living side by side with their former slaves. All in all, it sets the stage for racial tension and social discrimination for the next century, which will eventually have to be corrected through the civil rights movement of the 20th century. From a group of colonies founded on mercantilistic principles and religious freedom, the use of slavery, the influence of the Enlightenment, a hard-fought revolution, a declaration of independence, the arguments over the strength of a new central government, the guarantee of certain central liberties in the Constitution, the division of power between branches to prevent a tyrannical government, the expansion of American territory and a migration west across the continent, troubled relations with the native tribes of North America, a bloody civil war, and the rebuilding of a nation into a more perfect union, the foundations of America were set, and our nation was ready to meet the challenges ahead. We'll look at some of those challenges in Unit 2.